Good morning and welcome to this Micrographics webinar. I'm your host, Carl van Rooyen, Application Engineer with Micrographics. Today's webinar, we're looking at Inventor 2024, what's new, an overview of some of the new features within the new release of Inventor. If you haven't had a look at Inventor 2024, then I suggest that you have a download. Go to your account, download 24, have a look at it, and have a look at the features after the webinar. See what may assist you going forwards in the future. On today's agenda, we'll be covering the different environments within Inventor and having a look at what's new within each of those environments. We'll start off in the assembly environment. We'll move on to parts, drawings, sketch, some general improvements, interoperability, translators, and we'll close off with summary and a Q&A. So moving on to our introduction, we're having a look at what Inventor 2024 delivers, and we've got a couple of main areas here, four main criteria that were the concentration points of the developers with the new information. The first one being design intent, looking at capturing manufacturing processes within new features like the finish feature, and it combines appearance data with properties to describe or document real-world processes. Examples include things like material coating, heat treatment, surface texture, paint, and so on. So looking at this release, trying to capture design intent. What does the designer want within a specific design? What was their idea? How it's going to help with manufacturing? The next section of areas of improvement is to improve professional grade functionality or bring professional grade functionality to Inventor with improvements in performance with faster hole and punch feature patterning. Also the ability to create custom or cut back elbows, so you're no longer limited to 45 or 90 degree elbows within the tube and pipe environment. It's also support for user-defined RBLs or image-based lighting environments for the creation of realistic renders. Then moving on to compliance to 2D and 3D drafting practices. This is basically looking at bringing your 2D and 3D model-based definitions and 3D annotations in line with standards. So things like bringing in the annotate weld symbol within 3D parts and assembly environments without the need to create a weldment. Applying sheet or view-based revision clouds is now possible on drawings, or leveraging new ISO standard edge symbols and annotations. There have also been customer-driven improvements as well. The ability to rotate a section view plane is now possible. You can obtain oriented minimum bounding boxes for parts via the derive or simplify commands. There's also expanded iLogic snippets and read-only support with Inventor Professional. Autodesk Inventor 2024 continues to deliver enhancement requested by you, the Inventor and user community. So they're looking at what requests are coming through from the community and building those enhancements into the software. So let's have a look at the assembly environment. First, we have improvements within the rectangular pattern command or within the pattern commands within the assemblies. So the first up is rectangular pattern. You are now able to select a revolved, cylindrical, or conical face to then generate an axis for the rectangular pattern. So if you need to choose a direction for your pattern for rows and columns, you can now pick a revolved, cylindrical, or conical face. Circular pattern has been improved with the distribution or positioning method having the incremental now, having the fitted option now added. So we now can choose between incremental or fitted within the circular pattern distribution. I know I've always had issues where I'd say, okay, I want 4 of them patterned around 360 degrees, and we would have 4 objects patterned one on top of each other, because that was always an incremental. We can now choose the fitted option and have 4 fitted evenly around 360 degrees. So just as an example. So a nice improvement there, just brings it in line more with feature and sketch patterns as well. And next up, quite a nice improvement, we're able to edit or suppress section views from within the view representation. So view representations always captured the section view. However, the section view, we would have to end the section view and recreate it if you wanted to make changes. You now have the possibility to edit, to change the section view, and also suppress to then switch it off, or unsuppress to switch it back on. So that's there by right-clicking on the view representation. You'll now have a new section view menu entry with edit and suppress. Section views have also received quite a lot of improvements, so with that edit and suppress options, but also if we have assemblies that are greater than 500 parts, the end cap of the section does not display. If your assembly has less than 500 parts, which is typically the large assembly threshold or express mode threshold that is set, you would then have the end cap displayed. You can see in the animation here on the right, with the end cap displayed, you get that material texture, and that takes time on larger assemblies to actually update when you edit the section. And you'll see, so if you have an assembly that's larger than 500 parts, that end cap will not display, but you do have an option in the heads up menu to enable that end cap view. We can actually see it here. If I just put my pointer there, we can see it here, the little block with the checkbox next to it to display the end cap. Also within assemblies, more tied to substitutes in assemblies, and the substitute part that results from it is a new substitute status. So if you have that substitute part open and you right click on the part node at the top of the model, you will see that there is a read-only substitute entry in that menu. And if it's got a tick next to it, it means that that part is a substitute component. It was derived and created through the substitute process. And so we see in the images there on the right hand side the substitute with the tick showing us a substitute part, and then a standard component on the right hand side there without the tick to show that substitute status. And a nice improvement now in Content Center is the ability to set your thread direction in the Content Center table. So we'll see on the right hand side here in the image the parameter mapping. There is a template parameter called thread1 or direction. So this would basically be your left hand or right hand thread directions. So when you create Content Center components, you can then specify whether or not that is a left hand or right hand threaded component. Moving on to the tube and pipe environment, there is now the ability to create custom elbows or cut back elbows within the tube and pipe. So up to now you were only able to put in a 90 or a 45 degree elbow within the tube and pipe, which would automatically populate your pipe run with 90s and 45s, and these would be inserted as standard components, off the shelf parts. But now you're able to create custom angles. These custom angles would be inserted as a custom part, so that part would be saved in the project, custom to that project, and you're able to change the angle of the elbow by using a manipulator or typing in a value to set the angle for that elbow. Now, to make this possible, Autodesk have created a new custom elbow and return bend categories in Content Center. So we see on the right hand side, elbows, custom elbows, and return bends, custom return bend categories in Content Center with their relevant Content Center families inside of those categories. Now these Content Center families now have a column that allows you to set the minimum and maximum angle for that custom elbow. We obviously need a range that elbow can be adjusted between, and this allows for setting that minimum and maximum angle for that cutback or custom elbow. And then to cap it all off, to bring it back into the tube and pipe environment, there is a new tube and pipe style called custom elbows. So you'll see if you go into tube and pipe styles, there is that ASTM custom elbows standard, which can be used as a base to then expand and create other standards from there. Okay, moving on to a demo, we're going to jump into Inventor 2024 and we're going to have a look at a couple of those improvements. So we're going to start off with that rectangular and circular pattern improvements. So here in an assembly, I'll be able to go to the pattern command. And let me bring that back onto the main screen. And within the pattern command, we'll see rectangular. I want to choose a column here to pattern these components, let's say to stack these trays vertically. You'll see now that these circular objects are now possible to select to create an axis. So I can grab one of those circular objects to set the axis. It would obviously be the center axis of that part. And we can then set the, I'm going to go ahead and grab the components that I want to pattern. And we can then set the spacing for that pattern. And then jumping back into the pattern environment or pattern command, we'll go to the circular, can grab once again, grab those components, select a edge to pattern around, and you'll see that we have the increment, or we can do the fitted. And so we can adjust the values as required to get those components to be either spaced with an incremental value or a fitted value. Having a look at section views, I've got an assembly here that is larger than 500 parts, 798 unique parts, over 2,500 parts in total. So here, if I want to have a look, I'm going to go to representations, and let's have a look. If I right click on that start representation, we will see that I do not have a option for the section view. So there's no section view on this. Let me go ahead here to view, half section, and we'll see some improvements with the section view here. So I'll click on a face to activate the section view command. And immediately we see here that we've got move and rotate options for the section view. So we can slide that section view back, and we can see it's quite responsive. However, if I zoom in, we will see that there's no end cap displaying on that section. So we'll see as I section through, there's no end cap shown on the model. And when I let go, we just get a very simple plain face. And if we enable the end cap option, we will see we end up with that textured end cap. We can see quite nicely here in this robotic arm. And when we click and we move, we'll see that the section is not as smooth when displaying that end cap. So I'm going to switch that off. Let's not display the end cap, and we are moving the section view back and forth, and we can also then rotate. So we're moving or translating it, but then when we enable rotate, we've got our 3 axes we can rotate around. And so I'm going to rotate this around, let's say minus 45 degrees, and accept. Now if something changes and you need to modify that, we can then go back to the active view representation, right click on that view representation, and you will have a section view entry that allows you to go back and either edit and make changes to your section view, or you can go back to section view and suppress, and that will switch the section view off for that view representation, and we can then unsuppress that to bring it back in. So there we've got our section view improvements and enhancements. and the added abilities there. What we're going to look at here is moving on to the substitute status. Quick one here, I created a substitute of the robotic arm. We can see currently this is actually the substitute part that is open. If I go just across to my next tab, we can see this is the assembly and we have the substitute component there. So I'll come back to the part, I can right click on that top node and you'll see the read-only value there, substitute, has it ticked on. So we know that that is a substitute component. It's being used as a substitute in the robotic arm assembly. I have another part here which is just a cylinder. It's the raw stock for this assembly, and if we right click on that, you'll see substitute has no check mark. That is just a standard component being used in the assembly. No, it's not a substitute for anything in any of the assemblies. And then lastly, if I just jump back to the assembly here and go to assemble and place from Content Center, we will see in Content Center under the tube and pipe fittings, we've got elbows with the custom elbows option, as well as return bends with custom return bends. And we'll see here if I grab a custom elbow, double click on it to insert it. On the right hand side we have another key column which is a custom key column, and that enables you to put in a value for the elbow. You will see it inserts as custom, so clicking OK here will then prompt to save this in my workspace. I'll click save to save that file and then place that elbow in. I think I've placed that elbow in on the wrong side of the section view, so I'll just suppress the section view, and there we see the elbow at that 30 degrees. If I repeat that process but grab a street elbow and select something similar, or even just reduced elbow, and grab one of those, we will see that we do not have that angle option because it's not the custom elbow. And we'll see also that this will insert as a standard component. So it will go and save straight into Content Center without prompting to save. So this custom elbow is always saved as a custom part in your project. Okay, that brings us to the end of this demo. I'm going to go back to the presentation and we'll move on to having a look at a couple more parts improvements. So within the part environment, we've had some improvements with the 3D annotations and model-based definitions, updates that come in this environment. We basically have the ability now to right-click on the annotations folder and select the option to now hide all annotations. So prior to 2024, you had to right-click on each annotation and hide each annotation individually. You're now able to right-click on the folder and hide all annotations in one go. A couple of extra annotation types and improvements that have been brought in. We now have the ability to add an envelope requirement to hole and dimension annotations. So we've got there that 0.75 dimension with the envelope requirement added to it. Thread notes, now when you select a thread note annotation, it will highlight all of the faces that were created for that thread. So if you had a counter bore and you grabbed that note, it would highlight the entire counter bore surfaces. Then we have a all over modifier, which is now available within feature control frame annotations. So we see that image there on the bottom right. We've got that feature control frame annotation and the ability to add a all over requirement to that frame. And last one that I'll cover is the 3D weld symbol. You previously had the option to add a 3D weld symbol, but the part had to be a weldment. and now they have opened that up to non-weldment components. So parts and assemblies that are not weldments, you can now add your 3D weld symbol to those components. And there are more improvements that are just too many to mention within the limited time that we have, but there are more improvements with 3D annotations and model-based definitions. Moving on to more parts improvements, quite a nice option here now that has been brought through to derive and simplify. We have now the ability to, when creating a derive, to use the oriented minimum bounding box, or orientated minimum bounding box. And what this does is it aligns the bounding box with the longest dimension of the component rather than the component's coordinate system or the assembly's coordinate system. So this gives you a more accurate bounding box for the component that you are deriving. And this is also brought through to the simplify process as well. So when you're in an assembly and you want to simplify that assembly down, when enabling the replace envelopes, or when replacing envelopes, you can now choose to replace envelopes with oriented bounding box, and so that will create a oriented bounding box around the component. If you select that option, you would then, under the advanced properties, get the create model parameters option that you can check or uncheck. With this checked, you will get 3 parameters, edge A, B, and C, and these are essentially the 3 edge lengths of that bounding box that is created. And so we'll see there that parameter on there on the right hand side, or that option on, and you'll get the 3 parameters within the resulting simplified parts with those model parameters stored in there. Moving on, we have a new feature called finishes. This now allows you to add different finishes to a component. So over and above the ability to change the appearance of a component, finishes allows you to add multiple processes or multiple steps for a component. And so this is going towards capturing the design intent and the manufacturing process for a component. We'll see there in the right hand side finishes 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Those are the 5 different types of finishes as far as the icons go. The first one being just the appearance, so like your standard drop down from the appearance menu. It's painted blue, it might be red. Finish 2 is a coating. So if you are going to coat a component, whether it's anodized or powder coated, you'd have the ability to add a coating. Finish 3 is heat treatment. Finish 4 there in the list, that icon shows surface finish, so if you have a specific surface roughness. And then finish 5 is painting. So once again, that is a sort of a paint layer rather than a chemical finish. Now each of these finishes is captured as essentially as a feature, but the parameters that are linked to these finishes are also captured. So having a look in the model parameters, we see finish parameters as its own section, and we see there finish 1, we have area, appearance, a comment, the process, a description, and then a short description. Finish 2, we have similar information there as well. We'll see with finish 2, it's a prime and paint to a specific RAL color, and then there is a thickness value associated with that. So we've got a 50 micron thickness associated with that. These parameters, you are able to extract those parameters as custom eye properties, and you're also then able to use those parameters within your drawings so that that finish information can be displayed inside of your drawings. Coming back to parts, we've already seen this within the assembly environment, but the section view improvements, just to recap that, under the view representations, you are able to edit your section views. You can move and rotate section views using the new controls when creating the section view. A bit of improvement on the mark command that was brought in 2023. Previously, you were only able to project the mark command. You now have the option to project or wrap depending on the geometry that you are trying to mark. So we see on the right hand side two serial numbers. The first one, the top one in blue, is being projected onto a compound face. So when you're working on a compound or marking a compound face, you would use the project option. And then the second, the orange mark there, that is being wrapped. It is a single bend on that face. So we have a similar situation when doing a decal where we can wrap that onto the surface. So it's more accurate to the geometry itself that you are marking. Small improvements under parameters. There is now a new parameter unit type called hardness, and there are a couple of different units underneath that, or new category called hardness with a couple of new unit types under there. So you can now capture hardness values as parameters within your design. Once again, going towards capturing that design intent and manufacturing process. We can also export Boolean parameters, so your true-false parameters, they can now be exported to custom properties as well. And lastly, for this slide, sheet metal face. The face operation has undergone a slight change where the profile detection has been improved. So it has now been brought in line, with the extrude command, where the profile detection allows you to detect overlapping profiles or overlapping geometry, which creates profiles. Okay, moving into a demo. Let's go back to Inventor. Here we're going to have a look at the derive operation. So let's create a new document. Select derive, and let's go ahead and grab an assembly here. I'm just going to grab this machine subassembly. And I'll grab something too big. Grab this one here. So we've got the casting and the spindles of the machine. And we'll see under options, as mentioned, there's the use oriented minimum bounding box. And we'll see with this nice big casting here that's at an angle. Let's have a look. We'll go to bodies. I'm going to change this to bounding box. Let's have a look. We've got the new slide sub. Let's change that to bounding box. That one's down there. You can do the main base as well. Let's get that bounding box. And we'll see with this belt's a good example here as well. Let's get the bounding box for that belt. Let's have a look at this because it's at a nice angle here. If we go to options and we deselect that, let's have a look and we'll see how the bounding box for the belt there changes. Take that off. Let's go back to bodies. And not too bad on that one. Let's go back and cycle through. It's not too bad. Some of these examples aren't so great. Let's grab that. There we go. We'll see the bounding box for that object there. And we can go back to options, enable it. We'll see if we get a rotation there. There we go. So much more realistic bounding box there for that object. We can see that it's now aligned with the sort of overall length of that component. We'll disable that option and we can see that bounding box now aligns with the assembly coordinates. So we've got that option there for the derive, where we've got that oriented minimum bounding box. And if I come back to the assembly, let's grab that robot arm and we go to simplify. we will see under the simplify menu as well, if we go to replace with envelopes and we choose our replacement methods, we can say all in one envelope or each top level component. We can choose orthogonal bounding box or oriented minimum bounding box. Now in this case, not much changing. Let's go to a top view. Let's see. But we can see that some of these bounding boxes do rotate quite a lot in that change to give us our new orientations. And then at the bottom, we've got the oriented minimum bounding box. Let's have a look. If I go all in one envelope here, with the all in one envelope option, we'll then have the create model parameters there for that all in one envelope option. So it's only available for that option, not for each top level or each part where it creates that parameters, because this will result in a single file with those edge sizes. Click OK. It will create that simplified substitute. And if I go ahead and open that substitute, we can see the edge A, B, and C parameters inside of that substitute. And going across to a component to have a look at the finish options, we will see that on the modify panel we have the finish command that will ask you to input a specific face. So we can grab a face and you would then choose the type of finish. So in this case, this face might need to be heat treated to help it with wear on the, let's say, a bearing that's going to be mounted there. And so we've got options, carburized, case hardened, soft annealing, case hardening, different Rockwell values there. So we can choose, let's say, case hardening. You can set up the resulting appearance, the description. You can type in your description there, your short description, hardness values, depth, and a comment. Once you click OK, that finish is then added to the finishes folder. So not added as a feature, but added to the finishes folder. Here in the finishes folder, you can right click on a finish and edit feature, or you can just double click on that and you can go in and you can edit a finish. Now this carries through to the drawings. When we come across here to the drawing, we'll see here we've got a drawing with a text box in it. Double click there. I've pulled through parameters finish, and I've pulled through 3 different parameters here for that note for the finishing on this component. We'll see in the drop down you will get all the parameters, finish 1, finish 2, and various different parameters that can be added in there. So if we note at this stage that there's a problem with the thickness of that finish, we can come back to the part, we can edit the finish, and we can change the value. So I'm going to go from 8 to 10 microns, come back to the drawing, and as with any other parameters, we get that update in the drawing. And lastly, very simple one, just to show the sheet metal. We see here we've got 2 boxes that are overlapping, as well as a line that is cutting the corner. And with the improved profile detection on the face command, we can see that we can now choose either that entire box by selecting the sketch, or we can choose the profiles that are generated by that overlapping geometry, and the face will then be added to that profile. Okay, that brings us to the end of the demo. Let's come back to presentation. We'll move on to drawings. In the next couple of slides will be quite quick. Drawings now have the ability to add revision clouds. I'll go and do that in a drawing. So we'll see that in the next demo coming up. And we also now have the ability to add the sheet name into the drawing because it is now a sheet property. So in your title block or in a note, you can add the sheet name as a property to update and display on your drawing. There's a new edge symbol that's been included in your styles and standards, your symbols, where you can insert your symbols. and that is bringing in line the edge symbol. That edge symbol aligns with the ISO 13715 standard. So you can see here on the right hand side, we've got the edge symbol there with the various information linked to that. Then parts list, there's now a filtered parts list indicator. We can see on the right hand side we've got a parts list that has been filtered, and the little filter icon now shows both in the browser as well as when editing the parts list. It will show in the parts list dialog that the parts list is being filtered. So just easier to identify that there is a filter active on the parts list and you may be missing values or items within that list. So I'm going to hop into drawing for a quick demo on that. I'll come back to this drawing here, and we can then go and grab from the symbols. We will see we've got the edge symbol. We can then go and select an entity, click and place that symbol down as you would other symbols, and you can then go and select the position of your text, what text values are available, and you can then enter in your values. Once you've entered in all the values, you can then click OK. The edge symbol is created. Revision clouds you would find under the revision panel, and this is basically you have the ability to draw a revision cloud either linked to a view or to the sheet. So in this case, if I want to add a revision cloud that moves with the view, we'll select the view, and then placing down multiple points on the drawing will then generate a cloud across those points. Right click create, creates the revision cloud, and that is now linked to the view, and you'd have various options. You can add vertexes, delete vertex, you can invert the revision cloud if needed, and you then have that revision cloud to highlight where changes have been made. And lastly, just to go across to an assembly drawing, we can see here I have two parts lists. It's the same assembly, the same parts list, however the top one is filtered to balloons parts only, and we can see on the left hand side in the browser that the parts list shows the filter, and the second parts list, which is the complete parts list, there is no filter icon there. Double clicking on the filtered parts list also shows us the filter in the dialog box as well. So no need to go across to filter settings to view if there is a filter applied. You can only need to go there to confirm what filter would be added. Okay, let's head back into our presentation. So just having a quick look at some application options. In the sketch environment, we've found in the past that some sketch entities were difficult to see. And so now within your application options under your display settings, we can now adjust and edit through the color schemes editor the sketch geometry. So this just helps improve visibility, helps you customize your user interface a little bit more. And we'll see on the right hand side there, the sketch options allows you to change the various entities that are on the sketch and the colors they are displayed as. So just a quick note there from the sketch environment. Then some general notes, some general improvements. There have been improvements on the guided tutorials. You would have seen in 2023 the home screen has changed and been updated. The guided tutorials now take advantage of that updated home screen to give you a better guided tutorials experience. Inventor Studio, the maximum resolution that you can output when rendering from Studio has been upped. You can now export or render out to a maximum of 16,000 by 16,000 pixels, but that is going to be graphics card dependent. So the more capable your graphics card, the higher the resolution you'll be able to output. The HDR environment has been, or should I say, the environments has been improved. Your image-based lighting environments now support HDR and EXR. So basically you can create a new environment folder, you can map Inventor to that folder, and you'll be able to put in your own custom HDR or EXR files within that folder and select them as your environments for creating your renders. When running GPU ray tracing, or just ray tracing within your window, and you're not doing your render through Studio, that ray tracing, or the GPU ray tracing, now supports RBL backgrounds. So you can now, when you run your GPU ray tracing, that RBL background will now be shown in the background. So the HDRs, EXRs, they will be displayed in the background as we see in the image there on the right. The ray tracing dialog box has also been updated. So when you go to your view tab and you switch on ray tracing, that little dialog box that comes up, previously on the left hand side it said noise reduction on off, and then there was a low, draft and high option with no detail on what that was. Was that your quality? Was that noise reduction? Was the noise reduction low, draft or high? Now in 24 they have improved that so that we can see the definite separation. Quality, so your ray tracing quality, low, draft or high, and your noise reduction on or off when doing GPU ray tracing. Also, when doing GPU ray tracing, we now render out the thread image on the thread as well, so we can see the difference between 23 and 24, showing the thread in the ray tracing. And as mentioned right up front, there's been improved iLogic support. So iLogic snippets have been added for Vault. So within your iLogic browser, you'd be able to find the Vault snippets. Small changes in interoperability. On the Fusion 360 tab inside of Inventor, there is a new manual inspection option, which allows you to add a part from Inventor through to Fusion to create a manual inspection workflow within Fusion 360. There's also now a new out of sync warning that will pick up a change to the active model state or design view representation. So when you try to open the part in Fusion 360, you will get a out of sync warning that asks you or warns you that your file is no longer synchronized with Fusion. It would like to upload a new model to Fusion. A couple of improvements from the translator's perspective. With the UCS import, user coordinate systems, while importing JT or step files, you can now import any user coordinate systems included in those files. We have improved OBJ import performance, so importing of OBJs will be quicker. And there's also been support added for Solid Edge 2023 import and Parasolid version 35 import and export. So in summary, to close off the webinar before we open up for Q&A, we have seen improvements across the board within Inventor. Almost every single environment has had some form of improvement, but we see the majority of the improvements going into the parts environment. And this leans towards that improvement of capturing design intent. A lot of new features that allow us to capture new properties and parameters that can be used within the drawing to convey that workflow and that process to the people who are manufacturing the components. A lot of these improvements have also been quality of life improvements to help the designer through the design process. And from what I've seen is that the trend is going towards capturing more of that design intent, as I mentioned already, from the improvements in the part environment. We're trying to capture more design intent. What is the designer thinking? What do they want that part to be? What are the manufacturing processes being spec'd out? there's the ability to capture more of that information within the part, and then that can be extracted and used within drawings and elsewhere. So that there will conclude our presentation. I'm going to open up to Q&A. If there are any questions, then feel free to put them through in the chat, and then I will answer those to the best of my ability. I'll give a few minutes for any questions to come through. Okay, it doesn't seem we have any questions coming through, so we will close off there. I'd like to thank you for your time and your attendance. This presentation has been brought to you by Autodesk and Micrographics. If you enjoyed the presentation and would like to see more, we have webinars that go up almost weekly onto our YouTube page. It's Micrographics SA, and we would like you to go there. You can like and subscribe to our different social medias, and you'll get notifications for our webinars that we give, our presentations, how-to videos that we load up onto our website, so onto YouTube. So thank you once again. We've got our website on the bottom left-hand side there, and contact emails as well. And like I said, have a look at our YouTube page. It's Micrographics SA, and we have a lot more content there with regards to various Autodesk products. Thank you, and goodbye.